When we think of World War II, our minds often jump to the front lines. We see images of soldiers, tanks, and epic battles. But there was another enemy, a silent and relentless one that crept into every home and every trench. This enemy was the bitter, biting cold. During the war years, cities across Europe were plunged into darkness. Blackouts were mandatory to hide from enemy bombers flying overhead. This meant no streetlights, no glowing windows, just an endless, suffocating blackness. It was a necessary precaution, but it created an environment of fear and isolation that was hard to endure night after night. Compounding the problem of darkness was a severe shortage of fuel. Coal, gas, and oil were all diverted to the war effort. They were needed to power the tanks, the ships, and the factories that produced weapons and supplies. This left ordinary families with next to nothing to heat their homes. Imagine facing a brutal winter with no electricity and only a tiny ration of coal, if you were lucky enough to get any at all. People were freezing in their own houses. The cold seeped through the walls, turning homes into iceboxes. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was life-threatening, especially for the elderly and the very young. Soldiers on the front lines faced an even more extreme version of this struggle. In the frozen trenches of the Eastern Front, or the bitter winters of the Ardennes, frostbite and hypothermia were as deadly as any bullet. They had limited supplies and were constantly exposed to the elements. A moment of warmth was more valuable than gold. They needed something small, portable, and efficient to provide a bit of heat, to dry wet socks, or to heat a small meal. The official supplies often weren't enough, leaving soldiers to rely on their own ingenuity to survive another freezing night on duty. This desperate need, felt by both civilians huddled in their homes and soldiers shivering in their foxholes, set the stage for one of the most brilliant survival hacks of the era. People had to find a way to fight back against the cold, using only the scraps and materials they could find. It was a battle for survival, fought not with guns, but with creativity and resilience. They needed a source of light and, more importantly, a source of heat that was simple to make, used common materials, and was safe enough to use indoors during a blackout. This challenge would give birth to an incredible invention, the war candle. Out of the freezing darkness and desperation, a simple but brilliant idea began to take shape. It wasn't invented by a famous scientist in a fancy laboratory. It was born from the collective wisdom of ordinary people who refused to give in to the cold. This invention became known by many names: the war candle, the trench candle, or the Hindenburg light, named after the German Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg from World War I, when similar concepts first emerged. The core idea was to create a long-lasting, low-smoke heat source that could be made from almost anything. It was a true testament to human ingenuity under pressure. The need for such a device was crystal clear. Standard candles were not enough. They produced very little heat, burned out quickly, and could be a fire hazard if left unattended or knocked over. What people needed was something more substantial, a mini-heater that could burn for hours on end, providing a steady, reliable source of warmth. It had to be something that could warm a small enclosed space like a bomb shelter, a cellar, or a soldier's dugout. The goal was not to heat an entire house, but to create a small pocket of survivable warmth where a family could gather or a soldier could rest. The concept was simple. Combine a slow-burning fuel source with a wick, all contained within a simple, non-flammable container. The real genius was in the choice of materials. People looked around at what they had. They saw old newspapers, cardboard, sawdust, and scraps of fabric. They also had access to fats and waxes that were not suitable for eating but could be rendered down to create a fuel. By combining these waste materials, they could create something incredibly useful. This was recycling at its most primal and most important, turning trash into a tool for survival. The war candle quickly became more than just a heater. It became a symbol of defiance and resilience. In a time of immense hardship and scarcity, creating something that provided comfort and safety was a powerful act. It was a way for people to take back a small amount of control over their lives. Every flickering war candle was a small victory against the cold and the darkness imposed by the war. It was a warm, glowing heart in the center of a freezing room, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, a little bit of ingenuity can light the way forward. The beauty of the war candle lies in its incredible simplicity. You don't need specialized tools or rare materials to make one. The people of World War II used whatever they could find, and that is a key lesson for survival today. The first thing you need is a container. A small metal tin is perfect for this. Think of an old shoe-polished tin, a tobacco can, or even a modern-day tuna can. The container needs to be made of metal so it won't catch fire, and it should be relatively shallow. A low, wide shape is more stable and less likely to be knocked over, which is a crucial safety feature. Next, you need the wick. This is what will carry the fuel up to the flame. Again, people used what was available. A strip of thick cotton fabric from an old shirt, a piece of rope, or even tightly rolled up cardboard would work. The key is to use a material that can absorb the fuel effectively. For the war candle design, the wick is often made from a long strip of corrugated cardboard, rolled up tightly like a snail shell. The small tubes within the corrugation are perfect for drawing up the melted fuel, creating a large surface area for a consistent, even flame. The most important ingredient, of course, is the fuel. During the war, this was the trickiest part. People had to be incredibly resourceful. The ideal fuel was wax, but candles were scarce, so they rendered down animal fats, bacon grease, lard, mutton tallow, any leftover cooking fat that was saved and collected. These fats were not always pleasant, and they could produce a bit of smoke and a distinct smell, but they burned slowly and produced a good amount of heat. Any old candle stubs, broken crayons, or paraffin wax that could be scavenged were melted down and added to the mix. Finally, you need a way to melt the fuel. This would typically be done over a small stove or a fire, using a larger pot as a double boiler to safely melt the wax or fat without it catching fire. The entire assembly process was straightforward. You would place your rolled cardboard wick into the tin can, making sure it fits snugly. Then, you would carefully pour the hot, melted fuel over the cardboard, letting it soak in completely until the can was full. Once the fuel cooled and solidified, your war candle was ready. It was a simple, 4-part system: can, wick, fuel, and a little bit of heat to put it all together. Let's break down the step-by-step process of making a war candle. It's a skill that was vital then and could be again. First, prepare your wick. Take a piece of corrugated cardboard. The kind you find in any shipping box is perfect. Cut a long strip, making sure the height of the strip is a little shorter than the depth of your tin can. You don't want the wick sticking up too high above the fuel. Now, start rolling the cardboard strip up tightly, like you're making a pinwheel. Keep rolling until the diameter of your cardboard coil is just right to fit snugly inside your metal tin. Once your cardboard wick is prepared and placed inside the tin, it's time to deal with the fuel. Let's say you're using wax, which is the cleanest and most common fuel for this today. You'll need to melt it down. The safest way to do this is with a double boiler. If you don't have one, you can easily make one. Place your wax chunks into a smaller metal can or pitcher, and then place that can inside a larger pot filled with a few inches of water. Heat the pot on a stove. The hot water will gently and evenly melt the wax without letting it get too hot and catch fire. Never melt wax directly over an open flame. With your wax completely melted into a liquid, the next step is to combine everything. Carefully and slowly pour the hot liquid wax over the cardboard wick inside your tin can. Pour it all the way to the top, making sure the wax completely soaks into all the little channels and crevices of the cardboard. You might see some bubbles as the air escapes. It's important to let the wax fully saturate the cardboard, as this is what will fuel your candle. Let the candle sit for a few minutes, and you might find the wax level drops as it soaks in. Top it off with a little more liquid wax if needed. The final step is the easiest, but requires patience. You have to let the war candle cool down completely. This can take a few hours depending on the size of your candle and the room temperature. As the wax cools, it will solidify, trapping the cardboard wick inside. The top surface of the cardboard will be exposed, ready to be lit. Once it's hard and cool to the touch, your survival heater is complete. You've just used a 75-year-old technique to turn simple scrap materials into a powerful tool for generating warmth and light. It's an amazing feeling of self-reliance. You know, the war candle wasn't a secret held by just one country. The idea honestly spread like wildfire, born out of a shared, desperate need for warmth across the globe. Different regions, well, they adapted the basic formula based on the materials they had available. In the United Kingdom, during the Blitz, people in their Anderson shelters would make these candles using old tins and rendered mutton fat. The smell wasn't great, but the warmth it provided during a long, cold night of air raids was a lifesaver. They often used tightly twisted rags or old rope for wicks if cardboard was in short supply. On the Eastern Front, both German and Soviet soldiers faced some of the most brutal winter conditions in history. Here, the trench candle, or Grabkerze, was an essential piece of kit. Soldiers would use their issued shoe-polished tins or empty food cans. The fuel was often a mix of whatever they could scrounge. This included machine grease, animal fats from hunted game, or even low-grade paraffin wax. Having a small portable heater that could be used in a dugout to dry gloves or warm up a frozen ration was the difference between holding the line and succumbing to the elements. In occupied France, the resistance and civilians alike had to be even more creative. With resources being heavily controlled by the occupying forces, they had to make do with even less. They might use nutshells or sawdust mixed with rendered fat to extend their fuel supply. They would collect every last drop of cooking grease and every tiny scrap of candle. These small acts of resourcefulness were acts of defiance, providing comfort and enabling clandestine activities to continue through the cold nights. The candles they made were small, but their impact on morale was huge. Even in the United States, while the homeland was not a battleground, people on the home front were urged to conserve resources for the war effort. The can-do spirit of the time meant that similar ideas were shared in magazines and community groups. Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts would run drives to collect old candles and fats to be recycled. While they weren't facing freezing blackouts, the principle of using resources wisely and being prepared for emergencies was a strong part of the wartime culture. The war candle, in all its forms, was a global symbol of making the most of what you have. The true power of the war candle is found in the personal stories of those who survived because of it. These aren't just abstract survival tools, they were central to people's lives. Imagine, if you will, a family in London in the winter of 1941, huddled together in their cold, damp Anderson shelter in the backyard. The sirens are blaring, the sound of anti-aircraft guns is echoing outside, but in the center of their small, cramped space is a single war candle. It's not just giving off a faint light to see each other's faces. Its gentle heat is keeping the worst of the bone-chilling dampness at bay, preventing sickness and keeping their spirits up. There are countless accounts from veterans who served on the Eastern Front. One soldier told a story of his unit being cut off during the Battle of Stalingrad. They were running low on food and fuel, and the temperature was dropping to minus 30 degrees Celsius. He and his comrades used their empty ration tins and machine oil to create small trench candles. They would take turns huddling over the tiny flames just to get some feeling back into their fingers and toes. He was certain that without those small, smoky heaters, many of them would have frozen to death long before the battle was over. It was their only defense against the brutal Russian winter. In the Netherlands, during the hunger winter of 1944-45, a German blockade cut off food and fuel supplies. People were starving and freezing. A Dutch woman later wrote about how her family survived. Her father learned how to make war candles from scraps of cardboard and the foul-smelling grease they could skim off boiled tulip bulbs. They would light one candle in the smallest room of their house, and the whole family would gather there. The small flame was their only source of heat. It allowed them to endure the nights and gave them the strength to face another day of hardship. These stories show us that the war candle was more than a clever hack. It was a lifeline. It represents the will to live and the incredible ability of humans to innovate when their backs are against the wall. For every candle that was lit, there was a story of a child who was kept warm, a soldier who avoided frostbite, or a family that held on to hope in the darkest of times. The warmth from these simple devices was both physical and psychological, a powerful reminder that they were still fighting, still surviving, and not letting the cold win. The lessons of World War II are not just for the history books. The skills that helped people survive then are just as relevant today. We live in a world of complex technologies, but our power grids are fragile. A severe storm, a natural disaster, or a major power outage can plunge us right back into a situation where we have no electricity for heat or light. Knowing how to make a war candle is an essential survival skill. It's a fantastic backup for your emergency preparedness kit, providing a long-burning source of heat and light using materials you probably already have. To make one for your own survival kit, start by gathering your materials. You'll need a sturdy metal can, like a 6-ounce tuna can or a small cat food can. These are low and wide, making them very stable. For the wick, get a cardboard box and cut a strip of the corrugated cardboard that is slightly shorter than the can's height. Roll it up tightly and place it inside the can. For the fuel, the best and cleanest option is paraffin wax or old candle remnants. You can buy blocks of paraffin wax at most craft or hardware stores. It's inexpensive and stores indefinitely, making it perfect for an emergency kit. Follow the same melting process as before. Use a double boiler to melt the wax safely. This is not a step to rush. Once the wax is liquid, carefully pour it into the can, completely saturating the cardboard wick. Let it cool completely for several hours until it's solid. You can even make several of these at once and store them for when you might need them. They are compact, waterproof, and will be ready to go in an instant. Having a few of these stashed away with your emergency supplies will give you incredible peace of mind. Think about the applications. If you're stuck in your car in a blizzard, one of these candles can generate enough heat inside the vehicle to keep you from freezing. Just be sure to crack a window for ventilation. If the power is out at home for days during a winter storm, you can use a war candle in a small, well-ventilated room like a bathroom to create a warm space for your family. It can also be used to heat up a small amount of water or a can of soup. It's a multi-purpose survival tool that proves that the old ways are sometimes the best ways. Now this is the most important part. A war candle is a fantastic tool, but it involves fire. And fire must always be respected. When you use one of these, safety is your #1 priority. The first rule is ventilation. Anytime you are burning something in an enclosed space, it consumes oxygen and produces carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is an invisible, odorless killer. Whether you are in a tent, a car, or a room in your house, you must have a source of fresh air. Crack a window or a door to allow oxygen in and let any fumes out. The second rule is stability. Always place your war candle on a level, non-flammable surface. A ceramic plate, a metal tray, or a concrete floor are all good options. Never put it directly on a wooden table, a carpet, or anything that could catch fire. The metal tin will get very hot enough to scorch surfaces and ignite flammable materials. Make sure it's placed somewhere where it won't be accidentally knocked over by a child, a pet, or a clumsy movement in the dark. Keeping a clear space of at least 3 feet around the candle is a good rule of thumb. The third rule is to never leave it unattended. A war candle is a live flame. Don't go to sleep with it burning. Don't leave the room for an extended period. It's designed to provide heat while you are awake and alert. If you need to leave or go to sleep, extinguish it properly. The best way to do this is to gently smother the flame by placing a metal lid or another non-flammable object over the top of the can. This will cut off the oxygen supply and put the flame out safely without splashing hot wax. Finally, have a fire extinguisher or a bucket of sand or water nearby, just in case. Accidents can happen, and being prepared to deal with them is part of the survival mindset. The war candle is an incredible device for generating emergency heat, but it is not a toy. By understanding the risks and following these simple safety rules, you can use this powerful survival hack effectively and safely, just as people did during the war. Respect the flame, and it will serve you well when you need it most. The story of the war candle is so much more than a simple do-it-yourself project. It's a powerful lesson in human spirit. It teaches us that resilience isn't about having the best gear or the most supplies. It's about having the right mindset. It's about looking at a problem, like the freezing cold, and seeing a solution in the scraps and rubbish around you. It's about refusing to be a victim of your circumstances and instead taking action to improve your situation, no matter how small that action may seem. That is the essence of survival. This simple invention, born from the hardship of World War II, showcases the incredible ingenuity that lies within all of us. When faced with extreme pressure, ordinary people did extraordinary things. They didn't have instruction manuals or online tutorials. They used their creativity, shared knowledge with their neighbors, and figured it out together. The war candle is a monument to that collaborative can-do spirit. It proves that some of the most effective solutions are often the simplest ones, relying on basic principles and common materials. Today, as we face new challenges, from unpredictable weather to potential grid failures, the legacy of the war candle is more important than ever. It encourages us to be more self-reliant, to learn basic skills, and to look at the world around us as a source of potential resources. Every time you see a cardboard box, a tin can, or an old candle, you can remember this story. You can see not just trash, but the components of a tool that can provide life-saving warmth. It changes your perspective and empowers you to be a survivor, not a victim. So, the next time you feel overwhelmed by a challenge, think of that small, flickering flame in a freezing bomb shelter. It represents hope, ingenuity, and the unbreakable will to endure. The war candle is a reminder that even in the coldest, darkest times, we have the power to create our own light and our own warmth. It's a legacy of resilience that has been passed down to us, a flame that should never be extinguished. It's a challenge to all of us to be prepared, be resourceful, and always keep fighting.